My job in the country is basically I founded a company called Daauus Advertising Agency, which is the first creative advertising agency in the country. Many Somalis actually got hope to come back and return to their country and to start, new life in the country. And I was among those people who actually came back to the country and actually started in what they were good at it. And we are also involved in many projects. One that is actually, for example, in branding. We make a lot of branding. We design logos. We also build branding strategy and develop branding guidelines for businesses in Somalia in many different sectors.
Hello, Africa. You're listening to 1000 African Voices. I'm your host, Abu Rengwi C, coming to you from our Johannesburg studios. 1000 African Voices is a program that profiles Africans of diverse cultures who have traveled and lived across the African continent and the world. In this series, we will collect and share stories from all parts of Africa. Welcome.
1000 African Voices.
Hello, Africa, and welcome to yet another episode of 1000 African Voices. Today we're joined by Mohamed Osman from Somalia, who will shortly introduce himself to our listeners. Hello, Mohamed.
Hi, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to 1000 African Voices.
Great. Now you're really welcome. Again, I'm really excited to be speaking to someone from Somalia. We've never had such a voice, so I'm really curious to not only understand who you are, but also explore the country that you're from so that our listeners and myself can get a broader sense of Somalia. So Mohamed, maybe before we get started, if you don't mind just introducing yourself to our listeners in terms of the work that you do. What are you known for?
Thank you very much for asking this question. Well, my name is Mohamed Bashir Osman, better known as Mohamed bin Nimo. I was born in Mogadishu, Somalia, which is in the Horn of Africa, close to Kenya and Ethiopia. A very beautiful city, but also very known for the last 27 years as the most dangerous city in the world, which the country and also the city is now changing the narrative for the last 10 years as Somalia has got the first non-transitional federal government. The country is stable. My job in the country is basically I founded a company called Daauus Advertising Agency, which is the first creative advertising agency in the country, and I'm the managing director of that company.
And what is it? I mean, you say you're into advertising. When I type your name, Mohamed, it's quite confusing because the name that will pop up is the former acting president of Somalia, Mohamed Osman Jawari. So I'm sure I'm just saying that so that our listeners, when they Google, they can differentiate. Okay. Let's then talk a bit about advertising within Somalia. How are you finding business in the Horn of Africa?
Well, if you Google my name, I think you have to Google it like Mohamed Bashir Osman. And then maybe you can recognize by the name of Midnimo, Midnimo. The name that you just mentioned is the former Speaker of the Parliament of Somalia, Mohamed Jawari. But I'm not officially that one. I'm a young Mohamed Bashir Osman, who's based in Mogadishu at the moment and the managing director of Daauus Advertising Agency, an award-winning creative advertising agency in Mogadishu.
So your company is based in Mogadishu. Can we maybe speak a bit more about Mogadishu and then speak about the country in general. So if you just do a high-level introduction of Somalia, how do you describe your country?
Well, that is a very difficult question. I describe my country. Let me first start with the city and the capital city of the country, which is actually where I was born and where I live at the moment. Mogadishu was once actually Pearl of Africa, a very beautiful city, mostly white architect buildings of the Italian footprints. Mogadishu has actually the longest coastline of Africa. After a couple of countries, I think it's a very beautiful city with close to 3 to 2 million residents. The last statistic is from the Ministry of Planning and of the federal government of Somalia. But of course, Mogadishu has also been known for the last 27 years as one of the most dangerous cities in the world due to the civil war as well as the groups that were fighting the Islamic militants that were actually active in Somalia, but also the Somali civil war, which actually took place after the collapse of the central government in 1991. But I call it the white pearl of the Indian Ocean. It's a very beautiful city, is a great city that has a lot of memories in my childhood. I grew up in Somalia, especially in Mogadishu, but then left at a young age as well to Europe, then came back. Now I live and work in Mogadishu.
I mean, if I am watching CNN or BBC and they describe a city as one of the most dangerous, I always wonder whether for you who lives there, when you go out of your house and you walk in the streets, do you feel like you are in one of the most dangerous cities in the world? Does it feel like that to a local person?
Well, that's that. As a local person, as a citizen of this city and this country, I don't feel like, and I don't have the same point of view or the perception as people who don't live in this city. That is actually normal because I understand the situation better than an outsider or somebody that is not living in the city. Even some Somalis who are actually not from Mogadishu, but maybe other cities from the country, they have also believed this perception that this city is very dangerous. But that is, well, there is a security risk. That is a fact, but that doesn't mean that there is a life as well besides the risk. Mogadishu is there is a thriving business. There is a nightlife. There is just everything that any other city in the world has. Mogadishu has, but I think the security risk is kind of like exaggerated, as well as it's a fact because due to the security situation for the last 27 years, almost a decade or 2 decades, I think made the city very known to what has been labeled now by the media as the most dangerous place in the world. But I don't think that this beautiful city with white sand beaches and the Indian Ocean sea alongside, I think it deserves to be called one of the most beautiful cities in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking you that question, Mohammed, is as 1,000 African Voices, the reason we exist, or at least one of the reasons we exist, is to control the African narrative. We created this show to counter the views that lead to perceptions that certain places are in a particular way. So when you think DR Congo, Somalia, so we decided that as 1,000 African Voices, what if we created our own show where we talk to people like yourself and be able to say, you live in Mogadishu, can you talk to us about life in Mogadishu? And you suddenly now start getting a different narrative, a narrative that says there's actually nightlife in Mogadishu. Life is not that bad. So it's a deep, deep moment when someone from Somalia or other parts of the world that tend to be painted in a particular way shares a different view. So thank you for taking us through that. It doesn't mean there is no security risk. It just means there is life in Mogadishu that happens and people actually enjoy, have a great time. but it does
Mhm.
come with a slight security risk. At least that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yes, correctly.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking at your Twitter profile, Mr. Is it Mid Nemo?
Yes, that's correctly mid Nemo.
So I'm looking at your background picture. I mean, there's no way I can look at that and not ask what's going on. I don't know if you remember what you have as your background picture, but I can refresh your memory. There's a relaxed gentleman with a tie. There's a laptop in front. There are what appears to be buildings on a table with a beautiful backdrop behind the window. Wow, what is happening in the picture? It's quite an interesting one.
Well, thank you very much. This is a painting, or let's say an illustration that has been done by a very famous Dutch Eric Verkamp, which is a illustrator that works for the Financial Daily or Financial Times of the Netherlands, which is an international daily business newspaper. So it was actually an illustration from my story, my personal story as Mohammed. And there was an article that the Financial Times, the Dutch Financial Times, wrote about me, and this was one of the illustrations that I really liked. The way the illustrator artist actually illustrated my story about how I live in Mogadishu. So this is actually an illustration that is actually describing the way I live in Mogadishu. I have an office, which is the Creative Advertising Agency in Mogadishu, and the little desk what you see on the desk is actually buildings of Amsterdam, where I am also somehow from. I grew up also in the Netherlands. So he was actually trying to say Mohammed he's living in Somalia where he was born, but he's also having memories back in the Netherlands. So he didn't forget his time in the Netherlands as well, which is also somehow true. I have in my office not the exact buildings that you have in the illustration, but something similar, which is a memory from the Netherlands as well as other countries around the world, which I have on my desk at my office. And there is also a nice view, of course, of my office of Mogadishu, the city, which is actually thriving, and buildings are going on, and the skyline is totally changing from if you just look at it back for the last 10 years from now.
No, thank you for indulging my question. I find it is in the most unexpected questions that you get these wonderful explanations of what's going on. I mean, there's a palm tree. It's really beautiful. I love the skyline. I love the buildings and the trees. So when you think of Mogadishu, if you haven't been, you don't necessarily think of what's in the picture, and that's why I find it really interesting. Mohammed, you touched on the fact that you lived in the Netherlands, but you've also been to other places. Can you just maybe take us through some of the countries that you have visited and maybe some of the observations you have made on your travels?
Well, I love traveling. Let me say that. First, I've been to almost now for close to 40 countries around the world, starting from Somalia. So I've been actually many places. I mean, mostly 4 continents so far I know, and a lot of, close to 40 countries in these 4 continents. So, and most of them are European countries as well as African countries. I've been just recently, just 3 months ago, I've been to Johannesburg, South Africa, for the first time, which was really amazing. So, I've been many places.
No, clearly. And I suppose someone who runs a creative advertising agency going around the world, I'm sure, helps with getting the inspirational type juices to flow. But maybe let's then talk a bit about, is it Daauus Agency, the first creative advertising agency in Mogadishu? What makes it the first? I mean, why did it take so long for there to be a creative advertising agency?
Well, by the way, the name is Daauus. That's how you pronounce. So, and Daauus has a meaning in Somali. Daauus means peacock. So our name actually describes the beautiful animal of peacock, or a bird of peacock, which is actually very beautiful and colorful bird. So yeah, the reason why it took so long is because of, I think you have to understand the situation of Somalia. Somalia has been in a track of civil war as well as conflicts that was long lasting, that actually took very long. That was one of the reasons, and many Somalis actually fled the country. They have went to all countries around the world. You can name it, from as far as Australia or New Zealand to Canada and Mexico, and as far as Middle East, or maybe Asia, Malaysia, huh? or Africa, as far as Nigeria, to Johannesburg, and to Somalia. So Somalis actually are all around the world, and that actually has led that, Somalia was not stable for long. But for the last 10 years, the country has changed, and that was actually the time that many Somalis actually got hope to come back and return to their country and to start, new life in the country. And I was among those people who actually came back to the country and actually started in what they were good at it. I studied graphic design in the Netherlands, and that's why I am involved in creative advertising agency in Somalia. And luckily, I was so lucky to be the first Somali group that actually started this company called Daauus, of actually different people of different backgrounds, creative things, business mindsets. So it was really a journey that we started back in 2013, when the country got actually moved from the transitional government system to a non-transitional government system, which was recognized by the world back then.
All right, that's very interesting. And what type of projects does Daauus get involved in, like currently, without maybe mentioning names? What type of projects do you find yourself working on typically?
Well, at the moment, I was just working or editing a script about an animation explainer animation video that we are actually making for the Somali customs under the Ministry of Finance, which is also an institute that actually a government institution that actually got just reformed. The Somali customers is customers around the world. It's a very important body of the government for especially for the country, for each country. So we are actually helping them to launch actually the Somali customs, a new system that they want to introduce for the public. And we are making the animation for that project, for example. And I was just editing the scripts for both English and Somali videos that is just a series of videos that we are producing for the Somali customs. And we are also involved in many projects. One that is actually, for example, in branding. We make a lot of branding. We design logos. We also build branding strategy and develop branding guidelines for businesses in Somalia in many different sectors, in financing or in a telecommunication sector or in the construction and banking, for instance. So these are the projects that we are actually involved at the moment.
No, yeah. Thanks again, Mohamed. You mentioned that it's a script in both English and Somali. So that statement prompts me to ask a question on the languages that are spoken in Somalia. Is Somali then what is the official language? Is it English or Somali or a bit of both?
Yeah, the official language is Somali, but English is also kind of like a business language, which actually became a universal. Many Somalis now, they speak, actually English is unofficially the business language of Somalia, but the official language of the country is Somali. And we speak Somali on a daily basis. We write in Somali, but we also communicate for certain things in English, like professional work. If you want to propose something and if you want to produce something, because of it has become an international language which everybody can understand. As well as there is also a linguistic problem, which is the Somali language has not developed in many aspects. So as the country has been in an unstable situation for the last almost 30 years. The language itself has not been developed, and that's also a problem. That's also a reason why we're using English, because in certain words in English we cannot translate it in Somali. It's very difficult, so we have to use it as is the way it is, or use English. So that's the reason why we're using English as well.
No, lovely. And the population size, I mean, how big is Somalia? How many people roughly are in Mogadishu, just to get a sense of the population density?
Well, according to the statistics from different sources, they say Mogadishu's resident or population is close to 2 to 3, or I'm not quite sure, but they say 2 up to 4 million residents, of the city. But in general, the citizens of Somalia, the statistics are saying close to 15 million population are the Somalis in Somalia. But we don't have an official statistics from an official institution yet.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, doing a census is a challenging thing. Earlier today, I was watching a show. I think the Americans are getting ready to be counted. But even for a developed economy like that, I mean, they're spending billions of dollars on just counting the number of people that call the United States home. And I found it fascinating because you would think in a country like the US of A, they will have very detailed methods on how to go about that, but they were explaining the difficulty thereof. So I'm not surprised at all, Mohamed, that it is difficult to say, okay, are we 15 million? Are we 17? It's difficult because I suppose it's an ever-changing thing. And to find a method that works is also equally difficult. All right.
Yeah.
Maybe let's talk a bit about the culture around Somalia. I mean, culturally speaking, if you don't mind just taking us through the culture, the food. Earlier you talked about the nightlife in Mogadishu. But on any given day, Mohamed, when you feel like really good food in Mogadishu, what do you normally have?
Well, when you think about food or you talk about food, is one of my favorite things, as I also like to cook. Yeah, for example, in Somalia, we have culturally in the morning we eat what we call injera or anjera, and that is the favorite food in Somalia for the breakfast in the morning. And on the lunch, we eat just like any other, maybe some Asian influence, some Indian influence in Somalia. We eat rice, a lot of rice during the week. Many Somali houses only on Fridays they eat pasta, and sometimes they mix around the week. Depends on the financial situation of each Somali. But pasta is also one of the recipes that many houses or many Somali food is, and it comes because of the Italian influence and footprints back then during the colonization. So the main dishes are for the breakfast is anjera. It's kind of like a flat bread with a slightly spongy texture that's traditionally made out of, how do you call it, is both in Ethiopia and Eritrea and in Somalia. We have similar food that is injera. It's sometimes made from wheat. So it's really the favorite food for each and every Somali house. There are also many dishes which I might be forgotten to name it, but I think that's the most famous one.
All right, thank you. And in terms of sports, what is the sporting landscape like in Mogadishu, for instance? Those that are active, what type of sports do they participate in?
Football is the major sport in the country, or the most popular sport in Somalia. There is also basketball is also there back then in 90s it was very popular among the Somalis, and in Somalia there were actually a national basketball team back then, and also national basketball clubs. So football, basketball, and also athletes or marathons, or people who actually run, how do you say, athletes It's also among the popular sports. But back then, nowadays, until Somalia, football remains actually the most popular sport.
All right. I mean, you find that it's common in not only Africa, in the Middle East, South America. They do call it a beautiful game for a reason. I suppose because it's a low cost sport to play. So anyone from anywhere in the world can play football, which makes it great and universal. And maybe for yourself, Mohamed, I mean, after maybe say a long week, maybe working on a challenging project and you really drained and you want to relax a bit, what are some of the things that you do to sort of relax if you have any hobbies?
Well, everybody has their taste and hobby when it comes leisure time. I just like any other Somali who lives in Mogadishu or any other city in Somalia. I like, sipping a cup of tea and going to the beach and having taking the breath air of the sea and Lido's beach in Mogadishu, for example. That's one of the things that I like. If the security, sometimes allows me to go to the beach, it's definitely the thing that I like to do it on most after busy weeks or a walk.
All right. So you like taking walks, going to the beach and sipping. Is it local tea? The tea that you're referring to, is it local? Because I know in East Africa, tea is quite a big thing.
No, there is in every African country, they have this. Tea is international. I mean, it's a cultural in honor of African, but in the world is popular. But I think in every other country of Africa, they have their own style of tea. And in Somalia, in each city, they have also their own style of drinking and sipping tea. So we have a local tea, definitely.
All right. I mean, hopefully one day I'll make my way to Mogadishu, and the first thing I will do is to find the nearest tea station just to enjoy a bit of the local tea. Mohamed, just wondering, as we're about to wrap up this episode, again, having not spoken to a Somali on this show, it's been quite fascinating to cover the political landscape, the cultural elements, the food, and also to just get into the mind of someone who chooses to stay in Mogadishu and make the best of what's there. I mean, I'm sure you could have really chosen to go anywhere in the world, but you chose to be home. And it is because of people like you that our continent not only has hope, but it is starting to really thrive and compete with the best in the world. So from the team at 1000 African Voices, Mohamed Bashir Osman, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for making the time to lend your voice to the 1000 African Voices project.
Thank you very much. And 1000 African Voices.
Take care. Until next time, we'll see you in Mogadishu, in Joburg, in Lilongwe, wherever we may be. We will see you there. Yeah. Thank you, Mohamed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Auren.
1000 African Voices.
You've been listening to 1000 African Voices. Please join us next time as we bring you yet another African voice. 1000 African Voices is produced by Aburengwi C. Sam Ganich is our sound engineer, with our head researcher Jones Maleka. The intro soundtrack for the show is by the legendary Salif Gator from his 1995 album Forlorn. The song you're listening to right now is by Chronix, and the title of the song is Legend. For more information, including the contact details of our guests, please visit us on our website www.1000africanvoices.com. You can also subscribe to our show on iTunes by searching for 1000 African Voices. We are also available on Stitcher. You can find us as well on Podbean. The only thing we ask of you is that you subscribe to our show by logging on to 1000africanvoices.com and click the subscribe button. That helps us grow. It helps us keep producing and bringing to you more African voices. Until next time, Kungana Africa, and take care.
Being an ordinary person doing what's right. Yesterday at the football game, a little girl asked me my name. She said, "Sir, I've seen you before, tell me who are you?" I said, "I am a legend that you never heard of before." I said, "I am a lion, but you never heard me roar. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, that means on the ocean of fame I'm an unknown sailor. I'm the percussionist playing with the whalers, the one with the shaker, the mover and shaker. My name wasn't on the front of the paper, but me not cater. Much more than the work is greater. Creation glorifies creator. So all deeds done are in the name of my maker. I am a legend that you probably never hear about. Words from the lion's mouth. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, give praise, that means I made a change. Story of my life, ordinary person just like you. If you take a look inside, you see the great things that people do. We're out here changing lives day and night, day in, day out. BBC don't show it, CNN don't show it. He's out.